59 years ago, I saw first tulip in my life. And that was in the garden of my father. And now my whole life is with tulips.
Flowers began flaunting their beauty long before there were people. It was more than 100 million years ago when the class of plants that flowers belong to first appeared on the earth. The flower of an angiosperm has a male part, the stamen, which produces pollen. Whether transported by wind, bees, or humans, when pollen lands on the flower's female part, the pistil, it gets fertilized and gives rise to seeds. The seeds contain a mix of genes from both the mother and the father.
Before that, things reproduce usually by cloning, by spores that were genetically identical to their parents, and have as much variation. And then you have this incredible explosion of diversity.
The first wild tulips, scientists think, sprang up in the mountains of Central Asia.
It was typically kind of more open than our tulip, so it had a kind of hourglassy shape.
From Central Asia, the tulip made its way to Turkey. It was there that this beautiful flower bewitched the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire.
The Turks at various times in history revered tulips. Sultan Ahmad III was famous for his love of tulips, and when they were in bloom every year, there was a festival. Every night there would be some sort of performance to celebrate tulips. It was so extravagant, in fact, that this helped bring down the Sultan.
For his spending on tulips and other perceived failings, the Sultan was toppled from his throne. But it wasn't only royalty that got seduced by the tulip. In the early 17th century, the flower caused a whole country to go mad.
It was completely irrational.
I was listening to this gentleman by a friend of Constantinople.
And I don't think you can explain it according to any logical scheme.
Tulips swept the Dutch into a collective frenzy that has become known as Tulipmania. Their passion for the flower spurred one of the biggest investment bubbles in history, and for a brief time made the tulip one of the most valuable commodities in the world. It was a time when the Dutch dominated world trade, and a lot of them were getting rich. It became fashionable to grow flower gardens.
In the beginning, the rich people in Holland, they have big houses, and they want to show their wealthy at that time with tulips.
Picture, kind of gray, cloudy Dutch spring afternoon, and that color against that steel sky is a powerful thing.
And no tulips did so more dramatically than the type known as broken tulips. They were extremely rare.
A break was when the background color, the solid, matte, saturated color of a tulip gets a kind of flame of a second color, considered, the most beautiful tulip.
The most prized of all the broken tulips, the Semper Augustus.
It was a big white tulip with a splash of carmine red on it, which was really, by general account, considered the greatest tulip ever found. This was the epitome of tulip beauty in the eye of the Dutch.
If you wanted a Semper Augustus to bloom in your garden, you'd need to get your hands on a Semper Augustus bulb. But in 17th century Holland, Semper Augustus bulbs were very scarce.
At that time, only one merchant in Amsterdam had examples of this bulb. Eventually, one man prevailed upon him to sell a single bulb, which was valued at the time at 10,000 florins. This was at a time when the average Dutch worker would survive with his family for a year on about 300. And the fact that such sales were being made and for such colossal sums of money gradually became more widely known. And this really was the foundation stone of what became the Tulipmania.
At the height of the Tulipmania, one tulip sold for an amount equivalent to the price of one of the grandest canal houses in Amsterdam for a single tulip bulb.
Many persons were known to invest a fortune of 100,000 florins in the purchase of 40 roots. The rage for possessing them soon caught the middle classes of society. The merchants and shopkeepers, even of moderate means, began to vie with each other in the rarity of these flowers. The tulip is worth 1,400 florins, is worth 4,400 florins, 400 pairs, more than 3,000 florins, 400 close to the silver at 1,206 florins. It was thought to be very cheap at 5,500 florins. Early in 1636, there were only 2 roots of this description to be had in all Holland. So anxious were the speculators that one person offered the fee simple of 12 acres of building ground for the Haarlem tulip.
2 lasts of wheat, 448 florins, 4 lasts of rye, 558 florins, 4 fat oxen, 480 florins, 8 fat swine, 240 florins, 12 fat sheep, 120 florins, 2 hogsheads of wine, 70 florins, 4 tons of beer, 32 florins, 2 tons of butter, 192 florins, 1,000 pounds of cheese, 120 florins, a complete bed, 100 florins, a suit of clothes, 80 florins, a silver drinking cup, 60 florins, total 2,500 florins.
The tulip bulb market hit its peak in February 1637. There were 40 million guilders worth of tulip deals outstanding, more than 6 times the total amount of money there was in circulation.
There was an auction held in the winter of 1637, and some great tulip was put on the market at a certain price, and it didn't get that price. And the auctioneer offered 1,000 guilders less, 1,000 guilders below that, and nobody bid. Very soon after that, all these tulips were worthless, and all these people were ruined. They had put their fortunes in these flowers, and now they were worthless. They were just bulbs and plants.
Suddenly, the flower that was loved for its beauty became a symbol of human folly.
There was a period of tulip hatred in Holland after the collapse because it was blamed for these, this economic disaster. There was a famous professor in Leiden who ran around with a stick beating tulips and destroying them. And there were all these pamphlets and broadsides about the evils of the Tulipmania and the great whore goddess Flora, who was blamed for bringing the Dutch down as if, it was the flower that did it to them. It's an extraordinary historical episode.
What you see from here till there are all new seedlings. This is the first time I see them flowering. I wanted to be a carpenter, just like my father, working with wood. And when I saw the tulips, I was astonished. I said, that's what I want to be, tulip gardener. The process is quite simple. We use one tulip as the father and the other just like the mother, and we make pollination. That's enough. 100,000 seedlings are what I want. The rest is not good enough. That's the hardest part. You have to look out for the first, the only good one. This tulip, that is my favorite. I give it a big future. Just the right color, pure pink. This one I started 9 years ago with seed. When I saw this tulip blooming for the first time in my seedlings, I was just amazed. I sat there on my knees and looked at him for a long time. Other tulips, you walk by and it doesn't mention anything to you. And when you see this one, your heart gets... That makes a difference. Each time I look at it, I fell in love on the tulip.
It's only once you come to gardens such as the Hortus bulborum here that you start to understand that this is a very varied flower, and it's adapted and mutated into many different forms. It's a lot of fun to photograph. You can take a bouquet of tulips and photograph it every hour of the day, and it's something quite different each time.
Perfect. Gorgeous.
What I want to do for the tulip is to create a much bigger market for the whole world. Because a tulip must make money. It's a business. You can't have them for fun, because we have to make a living.
Every spring, 500,000 visitors flock here to see the 4.5 million bulbs that make it the largest tulip garden in the world.
The Dutch have mastered the propagation of tulips. And there are people in Holland making great fortunes off of tulips yet again. And it's not a bubble anymore.
One out of every 3 flowers bought and sold in the world passes through the flower auction in the Dutch town of Aalsmeer.
You're not allowed on the auction floor because there are 1 million carts zipping around at alarmingly high speeds. And it is like a sea of flowers. It's almost like watching paint being mixed on a palette. It's just dazzling in that way.
The floor of the flower auction covers an area bigger than 200 football fields, making it one of the largest buildings on the planet. Some 19 million flowers from all over the world change hands here every day. It's an extraordinarily complex system with a very simple purpose: to move flowers from the field to the home as quickly as possible.
In flower business, 3 things are very important, and that's being fast, and being fast. Because a flower that's fresh today will lose 15% of its value tomorrow.
The minute you cut it, it starts to die.
Once the deal is struck, flowers are rushed to the Amsterdam airport, and from there, all over the world.
This incessant, unrelenting movement of flowers and money doesn't let up for a second.
All for a product that has absolutely no practical value.
You look after every tulip, step by step, you get the tulip fever. It becomes worse, worse and worse. For me, it was something, it's in me, it never stops. In this garden, we have 2,300 varieties. You have dark purple colors. You have almost black tulips. You have lily flowering tulips. There's a tulip that has the shape like this, like a lily flower. You have yellow, red, pink, orange, bicolored, single earlies, single late, double late. So there are so many things in the tulips that once you start, you discover every day, even myself, I discover every day new things.